Hello and welcome. This time I'm going to be reading a collection, or assortment of stories, one after the other in a row. I'll be reading from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's collection of mysteries, as well as my compendium of short stories, and a few Hans Christian Andersen. All of these stories, the thing they have in common is it's gotta try to be sort of about love or romance, fit with the theme of Valentines. And so I hope you can just sit back, relax, and listen as I read you a wonderful story that may not necessarily end well. Okay. The first story is called The New Catacomb. It's a tale of a love triangle and a doomed party. "Look here, Burger," said Kennedy, "I do wish that you would confide in me." The two famous students of Roman remains sat together in Kennedy's comfortable room, overlooking the Corso. The night was cold, and they had both pulled up their chairs to the unsatisfactory Italian stove, which threw out a zone of stuffiness rather than of warmth. Outside, under the bright winter stars, lay the modern Rome, the long double chain of the electric lamps, the brilliantly lighted cafes, the rushing carriages, and the dense throng upon the footpaths. But inside, in the sumptuous chamber of the rich young English archaeologist, there was only old Rome to be seen. Cracked and time-worn friezes hung upon the walls, grey old busts of senators and soldiers with their fighting heads and their hard, cruel faces peered out from the corners. On the centre table, amidst a litter of inscriptions, fragments, and ornaments, there stood the famous reconstruction by Kennedy of the Baths of Caracalla, which excited such interest and admiration when it was exhibited in Berlin. Amphorae hung from the ceiling, and a litter of curiosities strewed the rich red Turkey carpet. And of them all there was not one which was not of the most unimpeachable authenticity, and of the utmost rarity and value. For Kennedy, though little more than 30, had a European reputation in his particular branch of research, and was, moreover, provided with the long purse which either proves to be a fatal handicap to the student's energies, or, if his mind is still true to its purpose, gives him an enormous advantage in the race for fame. Kennedy had often been seduced by whim and pleasures from his studies, but his mind was an incisive one, capable of long and concentrated efforts, which ended in sharp reactions of sensuous languor. His handsome face, with its high white forehead and aggressive nose, and its somewhat loose and sensual mouth, was a fair index of the compromise between strength and weakness in his nature. Of a very different type was his companion, Julius Berger. He came of a curious blend, a German father and an Italian mother, with the robust qualities of the North mingling strangely with the softer graces of the South. Blue Teutonic eyes lightened his sunbrowned face, and above them rose a square massive forehead with a fringe of close yellow curls lying round it. His strong firm jaw was clean-shaven, and his companion had frequently remarked how much it suggested those old Roman busts which peered out from the shadows in the corners of his chamber. Under its bluff German strength there lay always a suggestion of Italian subtlety, but the smile was so honest, and the eyes so frank, that one understood that this was only an indication of his ancestry, with no actual bearing upon his character. In age and in reputation he was on the same level as his English companion, but his life and his work had both been far more arduous. 12 years before he had come as a poor student to Rome, and had lived ever since upon some small endowment for research which had been awarded to him by the University of Bonn. Painfully, slowly, and doggedly, with extraordinary tenacity and single-mindedness, he had climbed from rung to rung of the ladder of fame, until now he was a member of the Berlin Academy, and there was every reason to believe that he would shortly be promoted to the chair of the greatest in German universities. But the singleness of purpose which had brought him to the same high level as the rich and brilliant Englishman had caused him in everything outside their work to stand infinitely below him. He had never found a pause in his studies in which to cultivate the social graces. It was only when he spoke of his own subject that his face was filled with life and soul. At other times he was silent and embarrassed, too conscientious of his own limitations in larger subjects, and impatient of that small talk which is conventional refuge for those who have no thoughts to express. And yet for some years there had been an acquaintanceship which appeared to be slowly ripening into a friendship between these two very different rivals. The base and origin of this lay in the fact that their own studies each was the only one of the younger men who had knowledge and enthusiasm enough to properly appreciate the other. Their common interests and pursuits had brought them together, and each had been attracted by the other's knowledge. And then gradually something had been added to this. Kennedy had been amused by the frankness and simplicity of his rival, while Burger in turn had been fascinated by the brilliancy and vivacity which had made Kennedy such a favourite in Roman society. I say had, because just at the moment the young Englishman was somewhat under a cloud. A love affair, the details of which had never quite come out, had indicated a heartlessness and callousness upon his part which shocked many of his friends. But in the bachelor circles of students and artists in which he preferred to move, there was no very rigid code of honour in such matters, and though a head might be shaken, or a pair of shoulders shrugged over the flight of two, and the return of one, the general sentiment was probably one of curiosity, and perhaps of envy rather than reprobation. "Look here, Burger," said Kennedy, looking hard at the placid face of his companion, "I do wish that you would confide in me." As he spoke he waved his hand in the direction of a rug which lay upon the floor. Of a rug which lay upon the floor. On the rug stood a long, shallow fruit basket, of the light wicker work which was used in the Campagna, and this was heaped with the litter of objects, inscribed tiles, broken inscriptions, cracked mosaics, torn papyri, rusty metal ornaments, which to the uninitiated might have seemed to have come straight from a dustman's bin, but which a specialist would have speedily recognized as unique of their kind. The pile of odds and ends in the flat wicker-work basket supplied exactly one of those missing links of social development which are of such interest to the student. It was the German who had brought them in, and the Englishman's eyes were hungry as he looked at them. "I wouldn't interfere with your treasure trove, but I should very much like to hear about it," he continued, while Burger very deliberately lit a cigar. "It is evidently a discovery of the first importance. These inscriptions will make a sensation throughout Europe." "For everyone here, there are 1,000,000 there," said the German. "There are so many that a dozen savants might spend a lifetime over them, and build up a reputation as solid as the castle of St. Angelo." Kennedy sat thinking, with his fine forehead wrinkled and his fingers playing with his long, fair moustache. "You have given yourself away, Burger," said he at last. "Your words can only apply to one thing. You have discovered a new catacomb." "I had no doubt that you had already come to that conclusion from an examination of these objects." "Well, they certainly appeared to indicate it. But your last remark makes it certain. There is no place except the catacomb which could contain so vast a store of relics as you describe." "Quite so. There is no mystery about that. I have discovered a new catacomb." "Where?" "Well, that is my secret, my dear Kennedy. Suffice it that it is so situated that there is not one chance in 1,000,000 of anyone else coming upon it. Its date is different from that of any other catacomb, and it has been reserved for the burial of the highest Christians, so that the remains and the relics are quite different from anything which has ever been seen before. If I was not aware of your knowledge and of your energy, my friend, I would not hesitate under the pledge of secrecy to tell you everything about it. But as it is that I think you must certainly, as I think, but as it is, I think that I must certainly prepare my own report for the matter before I expose myself to such formidable competition." Kennedy loved this subject with a love that almost a mania, a love which held him true to it, amidst all the distractions which come to a wealthy and dissipated young man. He had ambition, but his ambition was secondary to his mere abstract joy and interest in everything which concerned the old life and history of the city. He yearned to see this new underworld, which his companion had discovered. "Look here, Burger," said he earnestly, "I assure you that you can trust me most implicitly in the matter. Nothing would induce me to put a pen to paper without anything which I see until I have your express permission. I quite understand your feeling, and I think it is most natural, but you have really nothing whatever to fear from me. On the other hand, if you don't tell me, I shall make a systematic search, and I shall most certainly discover it. In that case, of course, I should make what use I like of it, since I should be under no obligation to you." Burger smiled thoughtfully over his cigar. "I have noticed, friend Kennedy," said he, "that when I want information over any point, you are not always so ready to supply it." "When did you ever ask anything that I did not tell you? You remember, for example, my giving you the material for your paper about the Temple of Vestals?" "Ah, well, that was not a matter of much importance. If I were to question you upon some intimate thing, would you give me an answer, I wonder? This new catacomb is a very intimate thing to me. I should certainly expect some sign of confidence in return." "What are you driving at? I cannot imagine," said the Englishman. "But if you mean that you will answer my question about the catacomb, if I answer any question which you may put to me, I can assure you that I will certainly do so." "Well then," said Burger, leaning luxuriously back in his settee, and puffing a blue tree of cigar smoke into the air, "tell me all about your relations with Miss Mary Saunderson." Kennedy sprang up from his chair and glared angrily at his impassive companion. "What the devil do you mean?" he cried. "What sort of a question is this? You may mean it as a joke, but you never made a worse one." "No, I don't mean it as a joke," said Burger simply. "I'm really rather interested in the details of the matter. I do not know much about the world and women and a social life and that sort of thing, and such an incident has the fascination of the unknown for me. I know you, and I know her by sight. I had even spoken to her once or twice. I should very much like to hear from your own lips exactly what it is which occurred between you." "I won't tell you a word." "That's all right. It was only my whim to see if you would give up a secret as easily as you expect me to give up my secret of the new catacomb. You wouldn't, and I didn't expect you to. But why should you expect otherwise of me? There's St. John's clock striking 10. It is quite time that I go home." "No, wait a bit, Burger," said Kennedy. "This is really a ridiculous caprice of yours to wish to know about an old love affair, which was burned out months ago. But we look upon a man who kisses and tells as the greatest coward and villain possible." "Certainly," said the German, gathering up his basket of curiosities. "When he tells anything about a girl which is previously unknown, he must be so. But in this case, as you must be aware, it is public matter which is the common talk of Rome, so that you are not really doing Miss Mary Saunderson any injury by discussing her case with me. But still I respect your scruples, so good night." "Wait a bit, Burger," said Kennedy, laying his hand upon the other's arm. "I'm very keen upon this catacomb business, and I can't let it quite drop so easily. Would you mind asking me something else in return? Something not quite so eccentric this time?" No. You have refused, and that is the end of it," said Burger, with his basket on his arm. "No doubt you are quite right not to answer, and no doubt I am quite right also. And so again, my dear Kennedy, good night." The Englishman watched Burger cross the room, and he had his hand on the handle of the door before his host sprang up with the air of a man who is making the best of which cannot be helped. "Hold on, old fellow," he said. "I think you are behaving in a most ridiculous fashion. But still, if this is your condition, I suppose that I must submit to it. But as you say, it is all over Rome, and I don't suppose I can tell you anything which you do not already know. What is it you wanted to know?" The German came back to the stove, and, laying down his basket, he sank into his chair once more. "May I have another cigar?" said he. "Thank you very much. I never smoke when I work, but I enjoy a chat much more than I am under the influence of tobacco. Now, as regards to this young lady with whom you had this little adventure, what in the world has become of her?" "She is at home with her own people." "Oh, really? In England?" "Yes." "What part of England? London?" "No, Twickenham." "You must excuse my curiosity, my dear Kennedy, and you must put it down to my ignorance of the world. No doubt it is quite a simple thing to persuade a young lady to go off with you for 3 weeks or so, and then to hand her over to her own family. What do you call the place?" "Twickenham." "Quite so, at Twickenham. But it is something so entirely outside my own experience that I cannot even imagine how you set about it. For example, if you had loved this girl, your love could hardly dissipate in 3 weeks, so I presume that you could not have loved her at all. But if you did not love her, why should you make this great scandal which has damaged you and ruined her?" Kennedy looked moodily into the red eye of the stove. That's a logical way of thinking to look at it. Certainly, said he. Love is a big word, and it represents a good many different shades of feeling. I liked her, and, well, you say you've seen her, you know how charming she could look. But still, I am willing to admit, looking back, that I never could have really loved her. Then, my dear Kennedy, why did you do it? The adventure of the thing had a great deal to do with it. What? You are so fond of adventures? Where would the variety of life be without them? It was for an adventure that I first began to pay my attentions to her. I've chased a good deal of game in my time, but there's no chase like that of a pretty woman. There was the piquant difficulty of it also, for, as she was the companion of Lady Emily Rood, it was also impossible to see her alone. It was almost impossible to see her alone. On top of all the other obstacles which attracted me, I learned from her own lips very early in the proceedings that she was engaged. My God! To whom? She mentioned no names. I do not think that anyone knows that. So that made the adventure more alluring, did it? Well, it certainly did give a spice to it. Don't you think so? I tell you that I am very ignorant about these things. My dear fellow, you can remember that the apple you stole from your neighbour's tree is always sweeter than that which fell from your own. And then I found that she cared for me. What, at once? Oh no, it took about 3 months of sapping and mining, but at last I won her over. She understood that my judicial separation from my wife made it impossible for me to do the right thing by her, but she came all the same, and we had a delightful time, as long as it lasted. But what about the other man? Kennedy shrugged his shoulders. I suppose it is the survival of the fittest, said he. If he had been the better man, she would not have deserted him. Let's drop the subject, for I have had enough of it. Only one other thing. How did you get rid of her in 3 weeks? Well, we had both cooled down a bit, you understand. She absolutely refused under any circumstances to come back to face the people she had known in Rome. Now, of course, Rome was necessary to me, and I was already pining to be back at my work. So there was one obvious cause of separation. Then again her old father turned up at the hotel in London, and there was a scene, and the whole thing became so unpleasant that really, though I missed her dreadfully at first, I was very glad to slip out of it. Now I rely upon you not to repeat anything that I have said. My dear Kennedy, I should not dream of repeating it. But all that you say interests me very much, for it gives me an insight into your way of looking at things, which is entirely different from mine, for I have seen so little of life. And now you want to know about my new catacomb. There's no use me trying to describe it, for you never find it by that way. There is only one thing, and that is for me to take you there. That would be splendid. When would you like to come? The sooner the better. I am all impatient to see it. Well, it is a beautiful night, though a trifle cold. Suppose we start in an hour. We must be very careful to keep the matter to ourselves. If anyone saw us hunting in couples, they would suspect that there was something going on. We can't be too cautious, said Kennedy. Is it far? Some miles. Not too far to walk. Oh no, we could walk there easily. We had better do so then. A cabman's suspicion would be aroused if he dropped us both in some lonely spot in the dead of the night. Quite so. I think it would be best for us to meet at the gate of the Appian Way at midnight. I must go back to my lodgings for the matches and candles and things. All right, Burger, I think it is very kind of you to let me into this secret, and I promise you that I will write nothing about it until you have published your report. Goodbye for the present. You will find me at the gate at 12.